Today we're taking my terrible, messy, and unorganized gaming setup and giving it a complete makeover. I'm taking my 10 years of setup building experience and using all of it to make one of the best gaming setups on the entire internet. Not only that, I'm getting to build it with my favorite person in the entire world, my dad. Since I was young, my dad and I have built every single gaming setup of mine together. Even though he didn't understand some of my passions at first, he's always been one of the most supportive people of me. Not to mention, he's helped me achieve some of my biggest dreams in life. And I'm so stoked to have him help me build the setup. Now that that's out of the way, let's talk about the idea for the setup. I started by looking on Pinterest, Reddit, and YouTube to get the inspiration for my setup. The only problem is that there's not that much inspiration to do something new. A lot of the people use the same thing or do something that's already been done before. The only thing that I really used from this inspo was the wall slats and the floating desk. So I decided that the best way would be to get a render done, and I got it done by somebody in our Discord to bring the idea to life. Went through a couple phases and a lot of back and forth, but this was the final render I was happy with. Let's go ahead and start the teardown process.
So the room is finally empty. My dad is actually on his way, and we're going to be finishing the desk, the wall panels, and the GA logo today. The cool thing about this is the monitor mounts are already up. We're probably going to have to adjust them once we get the monitors on there. This desk build, as you guys seen in the intro, we're going to be having it float, and this is going to be such a unique setup look that I haven't seen a lot of people do on the internet. I am determined to make this setup very good for you guys.
It was a huge challenge to get this thing properly mounted to the wall, but to get it done successfully, we mounted these countertop support brackets to the studs in the wall. That way the desk will look like it's floating once it's done. But before we mounted it to the wall, we really needed to cut it down to 6 feet instead of 8. So we cut it, sanded it, burned it for the aesthetic, and covered it in a couple coats of clear coat. The excess pieces that were on the desk will be utilized later on for something really cool. Don't worry. After we finished everything, we took the desk back inside and mounted it to the wall. Next up, we had to figure out the wall panels behind the setup. These panels are from wood Veneer hub, and they actually have acoustic foam built into them, so they're aesthetic and they're also functional. Now, they didn't sponsor this video, but they did send me out 7 boxes of panels, which is so nice of them. So huge thanks to them. Next up, we laid out all the panels on the floor to get an idea for what kind of design we wanted to put on the wall. And this is what we came up with. We came up with 2 vertical, and then in the middle of those 2 having a slant facing the setup. I've never seen anybody do slants in the middle, and I found out why. It took hours of cutting, measuring, math, and a willpower to live to figure out how to put this entire thing together. To actually mount them to the wall though, we used the nail gun in between the slats to make sure that we could pull it off later if we needed to. This process took about 3-4 hours just to mount all the panels correctly.
This wall is officially done, and we have to do the cuts for that wall today, and we're gonna have a lot more things to do. Right now, we just have the desk and a monitor on the wall just to kind of get a feel for what the setup's gonna look like, and honestly, it's coming along.
After we got both sides of the wall panels done, it was time to hang up the GA logo. A couple years ago, my dad and I made a wood version of the GA logo, which is in all of our mouse pads and all of my videos. And it's going to be the centerpiece of the setup, so we're going to hang it up right above the monitors. Put some new updated lighting on the back of the GA logo, and my dad and I hung it up. Just to keep things clean too, we also ran the cable through the wall for the lighting, so you can't even see it. After that was done, it was time to prep all the wires and everything for the monitors once they get placed on the wall. I bought a power TV kit that basically allows you to run power and also cables through the wall. And I had to take a drywall knife and basically cut out the holes for each thing. Once that was done, I put them in there, screwed them in, and then also ran the cables through the wall. And it looks like this. Now let's mount all of my monitors. Now that I got that mounted, it was time to add power to the monitor section. I added this 4-square power strip. It'll allow me to power all the monitors and even the camera in the setup. Once I got that mounted to the wall, I also added the top monitor and the side monitor and plugged all the cables in. For years, I played on 1080p, and it's time to upgrade. This is the Samsung 27-inch Odyssey G6 OLED. It's got 1440p, 360 hertz, and a 0.03 milliseconds response time. Now that I got it unboxed, let's go ahead and put it in the setup. Now, I've never owned an OLED anything before, it absolutely scared me when the bezels were so thin that I could accidentally snap this at any point. After I got it mounted, I thought it was perfect until I took a second look. I realized there was a gap between the top and bottom monitor where you could see the cables behind it. And the reason for this is it was measured from the other monitors, but since we got an OLED and the bezels are thinner, now you can see the cables, which is a bad thing. I had to take both monitors off and remount them and remount the top mount a little bit lower. That way the bezel would sit just above it to hide it. Luckily, it worked out. After I got that all completely fixed, it was time to just KO manage behind the monitors. Time-lapse time. To add the last thing, the camera. So I went on Amazon and I bought a wall mountable camera mount so you could mount the camera to it, obviously. And I started by marking where it was going to go on the wall, smoked some holes, and drilled the screws in. I also added a quick release plate for this camera mount in case I want to swap another camera in the future. And bam, it's done. Now time to build the PC shelf.
We have a couple problems with this. Cables getting from this wall all the way over here to these monitors is going to be a pain in the ass. On top of that, we need to figure out how much weight this shelf can actually hold, because putting two massive PCs on a heavy shelf on top of a panel on top of a wood thing, like that's a lot of weight to put on a wall that barely has any studs in. So we're gonna try to figure it out.
First things first was to find the studs in the wall. After we found them and marked all the holes we're gonna drill, we went ahead and started smoking holes. Now it's time to mount the countertop brackets. We have 4 of them, 2 up top for the top shelf and 2 on the bottom for the bottom shelf. Once we got those mounted, it was time to also mount the wall panels. We cut a bunch of wall panels to fit around the PC shelf so it had some depth. Then we had to build the back piece for the PC shelf to hide all the cables. Found this big wood piece at Home Depot that was literally perfect for it. Once we got it home, we cut 4 holes for the countertop brackets to slide into. Then we cut it, sanded it, burned it, sealed it, and drilled 2 holes with grommets for the cables to run through. Then I added all the necessary cables for both PCs, a network switch, KVM switch to switch between both PCs, and power. I attached everything to the wall. That way when I slide the backboard on, it'll fit behind it and all of it will be hidden. Next up, I added some Govee lights behind the backboard so that it'll appear like it's floating. Once all of that was done, it was time to finally add the backboard. Once we slid that on, it was time to add both shelves that we cut from the desktop earlier. But real quick, let's go over both PCs that we're adding to the shelf. For my main gaming PC for this setup, I actually got this PC sent to me by Intel a while ago. I put a 4090 Strix in white into it, and it actually looks really solid. But for my streaming PC, that's a whole different story. A while back, I built this gaming PC on this channel, actually. I originally built this PC in the NZXT H6, which I really like that case, but since I'm switching to the O11 Vision, I had to case swap it. First, I put the power supply into the new case. Next, I added a bunch of the Lee & Lee Uni fans to the bottom of the case and in the sides as well. Then I took the motherboard and AIO out of the H6 and put it into the O11 Vision. Then I mounted the AIO and put the GPU in. And lastly, I put all the panels back on. Then we put both PCs on the shelves and plugged them in. After I got the PCs on the shelf, I decided to add more lighting to the slat wall. I found out that the Govee desk lights fit exactly perfect in between the slats without even having to use adhesive. So I got to work putting them all up in the slats. It was tedious, but after a while I got them done. I added them all individually to the Govee app and it allows you to sync them all together. In the layout of the setup room, there's a closet right in view of the camera. And honestly, that closet is really messy and unorganized, and I don't want this to be my stream background. First, I started by taking everything out of the closet and tearing down the prefab shelf in there so that we had more room to work in the closet. After we took the prefab shelf out, we had to fix the wall by sanding it and painting it too. My thought was to try to display the mouse pads in a cool way, but it didn't really work out how I thought until I had the bright idea of IKEA lack shelves. Usually, a lot of people stack these vertically, but what people don't know is that you can actually mount these horizontally too. And since each shelf is exactly 9 inches long, if we put 2 of them together, it makes 18 inches, which is exactly the same height as our mouse pads are. So I built 4 of them and I mounted them to the wall one by one, and I left about 12 inches in between both of the shelves. Since the wall in the middle was kind of boring, I actually had some slats laying around that I had extra. So I got those cut and mounted those to the wall as well. Now that this is all built, there's 2 problems. 1, it's super dark, and 2, the closet has 0 power. I had to find a way to run power to the closet, but luckily on the other side of this wall, there's a power outlet. I drilled 2 holes and put power through, and now we had power in the closet. Now to solve the other problem, lighting. I had some Govee light bars laying around from the last setup that I built, and I decided to mount one up top, one in the middle, and one underneath the bottom of the shelf. Okay, now that I got all the lighting and up and camo managed, I need to change the lighting, like colors and everything, so I gotta hook it up all to the Govee app. Then we can decorate everything and we'll be done with the closet. This is also what I meant about the mouse pad sticking vertical. It makes for a really cool look, I think, and unique as well. Moving on to my streaming background. This is what it looked like before, and I was kind of happy with it, but I want to give a more unique look. I decided to tear all of it down and start from scratch. had a blank slate to work with, I decided to do something a little unique. I started with 2 wall panels on both sides, the left and the right. Once they were mounted, I had this empty space in the middle, similar to the setup. And in the old setup, I had this Yukon tool bench. The only problem with it was the countertop color. It wasn't the right color. Luckily, since it's wood, all it took was some elbow grease and some sanding to get off this coat that they had from the factory. Once I got the sealed coat off, it was time to burn it just like the other burned wood in the setup. Then I made sure to seal it with 2 coats just to make sure. And lastly, we attached it back to the tool bench and it looked amazing. Next up, I have this IKEA lamp that has been in my career since day one. This lamp got me 8 million views and it pretty much kickstarted my career, and that's why I have it in every setup build I do. So I hung it up using a chandelier hook so I could get that cool floating effect. After the lamp was hung up, I was kind of confused on what to put on this center wall, because above the tool bench, it just looked super empty. And since it's going to be kind of a centerpiece for the stream, I had to come up with something cool. After a couple days of thinking about it, my dad and I came up with a solid idea. Since day one, my motto has always been prove them wrong. So why not make a big sign that actually says prove them wrong? So we got to work. We took the icons and projected them onto the wood and then traced it to make sure we got it exact. With a skill saw, we cut out all the pieces one by one. Then I sanded down all the pieces to make sure that they were nice and smooth. Obviously, I had to burn them too to match the rest of the setup. Then I just finished all of them with the clear wood finish. We also took a GutzyAiden mouse pad, and this one is Snow Swirl, and we cut it to fit in the center of the sign. On the back of it, I put some lighting as well. We ran the wires for the lighting through the wall and then hung up the sign. Then like we did earlier, we're gonna also add lighting to these wall panels as well. And lastly, I just added this Gojo display. Now moving on to the under desk cable management. I started by mounting the desk officially to the countertop brackets. Then I cut and placed these Vivo raceways underneath the desk. After that, I mounted my power strip to the bottom of the desk and started routing cables and plugging stuff in. Since the power strip had to get plugged in on the left side of the setup, I ran some cable raceways to hide it pretty easily. For lighting underneath the desk, I added a Gobi desk light. On top of the desk, I added some magnetic cable holders. That way, if something falls, it won't fall behind the desk or underneath it. Then I added my Rodecaster Duo, my new audio interface. Then I added all of my main peripherals, my keyboard, which is the Wooding 60HE, the Final Mouse ULX, and a GutzyAiden Snow Swirl mouse pad. Link in the description. Right behind this door is the best setup I've ever built. It took me almost 4 weeks to build this entire setup, so let me go ahead and show you. This gaming setup took about 4 weeks to make, and it honestly turned out better than I could ever imagine. Not only did I feel like I achieved making the best setup on the internet, I got something even more valuable than that. A bunch of laughs, core memories I'm never gonna forget, and the most valuable thing of all, time with my dad. Please leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this.